I won't shake you. Take your dirty hands off my face. You don't belong here.
Secretary refused to shake Black CEO's hand. The next morning, $3 billion deal canceled. The elevator doors glide open onto the 42nd floor of Silvercrest Holdings, one of the most influential investment firms in North America. The reception area is all glass and steel, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline, marble floors polished to a mirror shine, abstract art worth more than most people's homes hanging on the walls. Executives in tailored suits move with purpose through the corridors, their voices carrying the unmistakable energy of big money about to get bigger. We'll start the presentation as soon as the partner arrives. Legal has signed off on everything. This is happening. $3 billion. Historic. Absolutely historic. The atmosphere is electric. This is the kind of deal that makes careers, that gets written about in business journals, that transforms companies overnight. Welcome to Touching Black Stories. Every story we share is more than just drama. It's a reminder of strength, resilience, and justice. If you believe in celebrating Black excellence and standing against injustice and prejudice, hit that like and subscribe button right now. We would like to know where you are watching from and what time is it for you right now in the comment. And then the glass doors to the reception area swing open. Dr. Peter Hale steps inside. He's 46 years old, 6'2", wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than the receptionist's monthly rent. His shoes are Italian leather, his watch is understated but expensive, and he carries a slim leather portfolio under one arm. He's the founder and CEO of HaleTech Global, a billion-dollar aerospace and cybersecurity company that holds contracts with the Department of Defense, NASA, and 3 major international governments. His company's facial recognition software is used in airports across 5 continents. His satellite encryption technology protects classified government communications. Forbes puts his net worth at $2.3 billion. But the young white woman sitting behind the reception desk doesn't see any of that. She sees a black man walking into her lobby. And she makes an assumption. Emily Rowan is 26 years old, fresh out of business school, working as the executive assistant to one of Silvercrest's senior partners. She's been at the company for 8 months, and she's learned quickly that image is everything here. Who you know, what you wear, how you present yourself. She looks up from her computer as Peter approaches, and her eyes scan him from head to toe. Nice suit, she thinks. But delivery people wear nice clothes sometimes. Probably thinks he can blend in. Peter reaches the desk and offers a professional smile. The kind of smile that's opened doors in boardrooms across the world. Good morning, he says, his voice warm and confident. Dr. Peter Hale for the Silvercrest merger meeting. I believe I'm expected. He extends his hand across the desk for a handshake. Standard business protocol. Professional courtesy. The universal language of corporate respect. Emily looks at his outstretched hand. And she doesn't take it. Instead, she folds her arms across her chest, her expression shifting from neutral to openly dismissive. Delivery personnel use the back in trance, she says, her voice sharp and condescending. You can't be here. This floor is restricted to high-level executives and scheduled appointments only. The lobby goes absolutely silent. Conversations stop mid-sentence. Executives freeze in the hallways. Administrative assistants look up from their desks. Peter's hand remains extended for another moment, hovering in the air between them. Then slowly, deliberately, he lowers it. His expression doesn't change. No anger, no surprise, just a deep, quiet disappointment that's somehow more devastating than any outburst could be. I see, he says softly. Emily doubles down, apparently interpreting his calm demeanor as confirmation of her assumption. If you have a package, you need to take it around to the loading dock on the ground floor. This entrance is for partners and clients only. She gestures toward the elevator with a dismissive wave, as if shooing away an annoyance. A few of the watching executives exchange uncomfortable glances. Someone whispers something urgent into a phone. Another person hurries toward an office door. Peter doesn't move. He simply stands there, his portfolio under his arm, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. I don't have a package, he says, his voice still calm. I'm here for a meeting. The 9:30 with Silvercrest's board regarding the HaleTech merger. Emily's eyes narrow. Sir, I don't know what you think you're doing, but impersonating an executive is. Emily! The shout comes from down the hallway, urgent and panicked. James Whitmore, Silvercrest's senior partner. The man who's been negotiating this merger for 6 months. comes rushing into the reception area, his face pale, his eyes wide with horror. He sees Peter standing at Emily's desk. He sees Emily's folded arms and dismissive expression. And he knows, instantly and with absolute certainty, that something has gone catastrophically wrong. "Dr. Hale," James says, slightly out of breath from his sprint down the hallway. "I'm so sorry. I was on a call with Tokyo. I meant to be here to greet you personally." He extends his hand, which Peter shakes with professional courtesy. Then James turns to Emily, and his voice drops to something cold and deadly serious. "Emily, this is Dr. Peter Hale, the CEO of HaleTech Global, the man we're merging with, the partner I've been telling you about for the past 3 weeks." The color drains from Emily's face so quickly she looks like she might faint. Her mouth opens, closes, opens again. No sound comes out. The executives in the hallway are staring now, no longer pretending to be busy with other things. Some have their phones out, already texting what just happened to colleagues in other departments. Peter looks at Emily for a long moment. She wants him to yell, to make a scene, to give her something she can defend against, some emotional reaction she can use to justify her assumptions. But he doesn't give her that. He simply says, in that same quiet, disappointed tone, "I understand mistakes happen, but choosing not to shake someone's hand isn't a mistake. It's a choice." Then he turns back to James. "Shall we proceed to the boardroom? I believe we have a presentation scheduled." James nods quickly, too quickly, desperation written all over his face. "Yes, absolutely. Right this way. Again, Dr. Hale, I cannot apologize enough." "We'll discuss it later," Peter says. Those 4 words land like a death sentence, because everyone in that lobby knows what they really mean. We'll discuss whether this merger is still happening. As Peter walks toward the boardroom, every executive he passes steps aside, some nodding respectfully, others avoiding eye contact entirely. Emily remains frozen at her desk, her hands shaking, her career imploding in real time. And in the boardroom down the hall, 12 Silvercrest executives wait eagerly to close the biggest deal in the company's history. They have no idea that it's already over. They just don't know it yet. 3 months earlier, Silvercrest Holdings had been desperate. The firm was bleeding talent to younger, more agile competitors. Their returns were stagnant. Their client base was aging. They needed something big, something transformative, to prove they were still relevant in a rapidly changing market. That's when James Whitmore identified HaleTech Global as the perfect acquisition target. HaleTech was everything Silvercrest wasn't. Innovative, diverse, tech-forward, with a client roster that included governments and Fortune 100 companies. A merger would give Silvercrest access to cutting-edge aerospace technology, lucrative government contracts, and immediate credibility in the cybersecurity sector. It would also be worth $3 billion, the largest merger in Silvercrest's 90-year history. James had spent months courting Peter Hale, flying to meetings in San Francisco, Atlanta, and Washington, D.C., building a relationship, demonstrating value, proving that Silvercrest could be the right partner for HaleTech's next phase of growth. Peter had been cautious but open. He'd built HaleTech from nothing. A single government contract 14 years ago had grown into a multinational corporation with 3,000 employees. He wasn't going to hand it over to just anyone. But Silvercrest's offer was compelling. Their global network, their established client relationships, their financial infrastructure. After 3 months of negotiation, Peter had agreed to come to New York for the final presentation. The meeting where both boards would review the terms, sign the preliminary agreements, and announce the merger to the world. This morning's meeting was supposed to be a formality, a celebration, the beginning of a new era for both companies. Instead, it had started with a refused handshake and a receptionist who'd looked at a black billionaire and seen a delivery person. Now, Peter sits at the head of the massive boardroom table, his portfolio closed in front of him, his expression unreadable. Around the table, 12 Silvercrest executives shift uncomfortably in their leather chairs. They've all heard what happened in the lobby. News travels fast in a company this size, but they're hoping it can be smoothed over, apologized away, forgotten. James Whitmore stands at the front of the room beside a projection screen showing HaleTech's impressive financial metrics. Revenue growth, profit margins, contract renewals, innovation patents. "Dr. Hale," James begins, his voice carrying forced enthusiasm, "we're incredibly excited to present the final terms of our partnership. As you can see from these projections, the combined entity would position us as the leading." "James," Peter interrupts quietly. Before we continue, I'd like to ask everyone in this room a question. James freezes mid-sentence. Of course. Whatever you need. Peter looks around the table, making eye contact with each executive. Do you believe this partnership is built on respect? Silence. The question hangs in the air like smoke. No one answers. A few executives glance at each other, unsure how to respond. Others study the table in front of them, suddenly very interested in the wood grain. Peter continues, his tone still calm but carrying an edge now. Because I was under the impression that a $3 billion merger between two major corporations would be founded on mutual respect. Professional courtesy. Basic human decency. Dr. Hale, James starts. Your receptionist looked at me and decided I was a delivery person, Peter says, his voice never rising but somehow filling the entire room. She refused to shake my hand. She told me to use the back entrance. She didn't ask my name. She didn't check her appointment calendar. She simply saw a black man in a suit and made an assumption. The executives sit frozen, not even pretending to have a defense. Now, I could believe that was an isolated incident, Peter continues. One employee's poor judgment. Except that I did some research last night after James called to apologize. He opens his portfolio and pulls out a thin stack of papers. In the past 5 years, Silvercrest Holdings has settled 3 discrimination lawsuits filed by employees. All 3 involved racial discrimination. All 3 were settled quietly with NDAs attached. Your HR department has a turnover rate of 47% among employees of color, nearly triple the rate for white employees. And your executive leadership team, the 12 of you sitting in this room, includes 11 white men and 1 white woman. 0 people of color. He slides the papers across the table toward James. So I ask again, is this partnership built on respect? Or is it built on the assumption that HaleTech's value is worth overlooking the fact that your company has a documented culture problem? A woman at the far end of the table, Rebecca Stern, Silvercrest's chief operating officer, clears her throat nervously. Dr. Hale, I want to assure you that what happened this morning is not representative of Silvercrest's values. Emily Rowan is a junior employee who exercised extremely poor judgment, and we will be addressing that immediately. Will you? Peter asks. Because according to the email I received 20 minutes ago from Emily herself, she's very sorry for the misunderstanding. Not for her prejudice. Not for her assumption. For the misunderstanding. He pulls out his phone and reads from the screen. Quote, I sincerely apologize for any confusion this morning. I was trying to follow security protocols and didn't realize who you were. I hope this misunderstanding won't affect our important business relationship. End quote. Peter looks up. She's not sorry for what she did. She's sorry she did it to someone important. The executives shift uncomfortably, but no one offers a rebuttal. Because they know he's right. The foundation of a multi-billion-dollar merger cannot begin with prejudice at the front desk, Peter says, closing his portfolio with a decisive snap. If that's the culture of this organization, if that's what your employees feel empowered to do in front of witnesses, then I need to seriously reconsider whether HaleTech should be associated with Silvercrest at all. James goes pale. Dr. Hale, please, let's not make any hasty decisions. We can address this. We can implement training, update our policies. You've had 90 years to implement training, Peter interrupts. You've had 5 discrimination lawsuits to update your policies. What you haven't had is accountability. He stands, and every executive in the room instinctively tenses. I'm going to return to my hotel. I'm going to review every aspect of this merger proposal. And I'm going to decide whether I want HaleTech's name attached to a company that apparently judges people by their skin color before their credentials. Dr. Hale. Peter holds up a hand, stopping James mid-sentence. I'll have a decision for you by tomorrow morning. Until then, I'd suggest you spend some time considering what kind of company you actually want to be. He picks up his portfolio and walks toward the door. Every executive watches him leave, their $3 billion deal walking out of the room with him. The door closes with a quiet click. For a moment, no one moves. Then James slams his hand on the table, so hard his coffee cup rattles. How the hell did this happen? How did no one think to brief the front desk staff about who was coming today? Rebecca speaks up, her voice tight. Emily was supposed to receive the visitor list. I sent it to her assistant. Her assistant? James's voice rises. Her assistant? For the most important meeting in this company's history, we relied on a chain of assistants. James, we need to focus on damage control. Damage control? James laughs, but there's no humor in it. Rebecca, he just walked out of the biggest deal we've ever negotiated because our receptionist treated him like a delivery driver. What exactly is your plan for controlling that damage? The executives start talking over each other, voices rising, panic setting in. And in her cubicle outside the boardroom, Emily Rowan sits with her head in her hands, tears streaming down her face, finally understanding the magnitude of what she's done. She'd refused to shake a billionaire's hand because she assumed he didn't belong there. And now, that refusal might cost her company $3 billion. This is only the beginning of one of the most devastating corporate collapses you'll ever witness. Subscribe now to see what happens when prejudice meets consequence at the highest levels of business. You won't want to miss what Dr. Peter Hale does next. Hit that subscribe button. If you were an executive in that boardroom, what would you do to try to save this deal? Drop your answer in the comments. That evening, as the sun set over Manhattan, Silvercrest Holdings descended into crisis mode. Emergency meetings were called. Legal teams were consulted. PR consultants were pulled away from their dinner plans. The board of directors, normally hands-off unless quarterly earnings were at stake, demanded immediate updates. James Whitmore sat in his office on the 45th floor, his tie loosened, his shirt collar unbuttoned, staring at his computer screen. He'd sent Dr. Hale 17 emails in the past 6 hours. Apologizing, explaining, begging for another chance, promising concrete changes to company culture. None had received a response. He'd tried calling. The calls went to voicemail. He'd even considered showing up at Peter's hotel, but his chief legal officer had physically stopped him at the elevator, explaining that unannounced visits could be construed as harassment and would only make things worse. So James sat in his office, watching the deal of his career evaporate, and there was nothing he could do about it. A knock on his door interrupted his spiral. Rebecca Stern entered without waiting for permission, her tablet in hand, her expression grim. "We have a problem." "Another one?" James said bitterly. "The board wants Emily terminated immediately. Tonight." James leaned back in his chair. "Of course they do. They're saying she's a liability. That if this deal falls apart and word gets out why, we'll be crucified in the press. They want her gone before the story breaks." "Has the story broken?" Rebecca hesitated. "Not yet, but several people witnessed the incident. Someone's going to talk eventually." James rubbed his eyes. "Where's Emily now?" "HR has her in a conference room. She's been there for 3 hours." "Is she talking to anyone?" "Just crying, from what I hear." James stood and walked to his window, looking out at the glittering lights of the city. Somewhere out there, Peter Hale was making a decision that would determine Silvercrest's future. "What would you do?" James asked quietly. "If you were in Peter's position?" Rebecca didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was careful. "Honestly, I'd walk away. We've given him every reason to question our integrity. We're talking about $3 billion. He's worth more than $2 billion himself," Rebecca pointed out. "He doesn't need us. We need him." James turned from the window. "Then we need to give him a reason to stay." "Like what?" "Like demonstrating that we take this seriously. That we're willing to make real changes, not just promise them." "You mean firing Emily?" "I mean cleaning the house," James said. "Emily is the symptom, not the disease. Peter showed us the data, 3 discrimination settlements, terrible retention rates for employees of color, 0 diversity in leadership. That didn't happen by accident. That happened because we let it happen." Rebecca's eyes widened. "James, if you're suggesting what I think you're suggesting, I'm suggesting that if we want to save this deal, we need to prove we're serious about change. And that means starting at the top." Meanwhile, across town at the Mandarin Oriental, Dr. Peter Hale sat in his suite, his laptop open, 3 phones on the desk in front of him. He wasn't reviewing Silvercrest's merger proposal. He was reviewing their culture. Employee reviews from Glassdoor. Great pay, toxic culture, diversity initiatives are all talk. LinkedIn posts from former employees, many of them people of color, describing their experiences. "I was the only black person in my department. Colleagues constantly asked me to explain the black perspective on things. HR said I was being too sensitive." News articles about those 3 discrimination settlements, the ones Silvercrest thought they'd buried with NDAs and confidential payouts. Peter's research team had found them anyway, and email threads. Ones that Silvercrest's legal team would probably claim were privileged, but that Peter's contacts in the industry had passed along. showing executives debating whether culture fit was more important than diversity in hiring decisions. The picture was clear. Silvercrest had a systemic problem. Emily Rowan's refusal to shake his hand wasn't an aberration. It was a reflection of deeper attitudes that permeated the organization. His phone buzzed. A text from his chief operating officer, Patricia Chase. "Boss, I know you're dealing with the Silvercrest situation. Just wanted you to know, if you kill this deal, the whole company will back you. We'd rather walk away than partner with a firm that doesn't respect who you are." Peter smiled slightly and typed back, "Thanks, Pat. Decision coming soon." Another buzz. This time, an email from Senator Catherine Bradley, who sat on the Armed Services Committee and had been instrumental in securing several of HaleTech's government contracts. "Peter, heard about what happened. Whatever you decide, you have my full support. The defense industry needs more leaders with integrity, not fewer. Let me know if you need anything." More messages came in throughout the evening. CEOs he'd worked with, colleagues from his MIT days, former employees who'd moved on to other companies but still considered him a mentor. All of them saying the same thing: you don't need them. Walk away. But Peter hadn't built a billion-dollar company by making emotional decisions. He built it through careful analysis, strategic thinking, and calculated risk-taking. So he did what he always did when facing a major decision. He made a list. Reasons to proceed with the merger. $3 billion valuation would provide capital for HaleTech's expansion into new markets. Silvercrest's global network would accelerate international growth. Combined entity would be positioned as industry leader in aerospace tech. Employees and shareholders would benefit financially. Reasons to walk away. Silvercrest's documented culture problems suggest deep organizational dysfunction. Associating HaleTech with a firm facing discrimination issues could damage hard-earned reputation. Message to employees. Their dignity is less important than money. Message to industry. HaleTech will tolerate disrespect if the price is right. Peter stared at the list for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. James Whitmore's office. "This is Dr. Peter Hale. Is James available?" A brief pause. "One moment, Dr. Hale. Let me transfer you immediately." The phone rang once before James picked up. "Peter, Dr. Hale, thank you for calling. I've been trying to reach you all day." "I know," Peter said. "I needed time to think." "Of course. Absolutely. Take all the time you need. We're committed to addressing what happened and making concrete changes." "James, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Anything. If I weren't a billionaire, if I were just a regular black professional walking into your building, do you believe Emily Rowan would have treated me any differently?" Silence on the other end of the line. Peter waited. Finally, James spoke, his voice quiet. "No, I don't think she would have." "Neither do I," Peter said. "Which means the problem isn't that she made a mistake. The problem is that she felt comfortable making that assumption in your workplace. She felt empowered to treat someone that way in your lobby. And that tells me everything I need to know about Silvercrest's culture." "Peter, I haven't made my final decision yet," Peter interrupted. "But I want you to understand something. HaleTech was built by people who were told they didn't belong. Women in tech, immigrants, people of color, LGBTQ employees. We created a company where talent mattered more than demographics, where respect was non-negotiable, where people could walk through our doors and know they'd be judged by their work, not their appearance." He paused, letting that sink in. "If I merge HaleTech with Silvercrest, I'm sending a message to every one of those employees that their dignity has a price tag. That for $3 billion, I'm willing to overlook the fact that your company makes people like them feel unwelcome." "We want to change," James said desperately. "We're already implementing new policies." "Policies don't change culture," Peter said. "People do. Leadership does. And I need to know that your leadership is actually committed to change, not just committed to saving this deal. What would you need to see? Tell me what it would take to prove that to you." Peter looked at his list again. "I'll have my answer for you tomorrow morning," he said. 9 a.m. I'll meet you in your boardroom. Bring your full board of directors. I want everyone who has decision-making authority at Silvercrest in that room." "Done. Whatever you need. And James? One more thing." "Yes. I want Emily Rowan in that meeting too." James was clearly surprised. "Emily? Are you sure?" "I would think." "I'm very sure," Peter said. "If we're going to talk about culture change, The person who precipitated this crisis should hear what that conversation sounds like. After hanging up, Peter sat back in his chair and looked out at the Manhattan skyline. Tomorrow morning, he will make his decision. And whatever that decision was, it would send a message that echoed far beyond one merger, one company, one refused handshake. It would send a message about what real integrity looks like in the face of injustice, about what happens when power meets principle, and about the cost of prejudice in a world where respect should never be negotiable. The next morning's meeting will shock you the entire business world. Subscribe now to see Dr. Peter Hale's final decision and the devastating consequences that follow. This is corporate accountability at its highest level. Don't miss it. Hit that subscribe button. Do you think companies should face financial consequences for discrimination, even if it means losing major deals? Share your thoughts below. At 11:47 p.m., Rebecca Stern sent an emergency email to Silvercrest's entire board of directors. Subject: Urgent, emergency board meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. The email contained one line. Dr. Hale has agreed to meet tomorrow morning. Attendance is mandatory. This will determine whether the HaleTech merger proceeds. Within minutes, replies flooded in from board members across the country. I'll fly in from Chicago tonight. Canceling my morning meetings. What happened? Why is this in jeopardy? Rebecca didn't answer the last question. They'd find out soon enough. By midnight, Silvercrest's top 15 executives were still in the building, preparing for what might be the most important meeting in the company's history. James Whitmore worked with his legal team to review every aspect of the proposed merger, looking for terms they could sweeten, concessions they could make, anything that might convince Peter to stay. The CFO ran financial projections showing what losing this deal would mean: stock price impact, revenue forecasts, competitive positioning. Every scenario looked bleak. The chief marketing officer drafted 3 different press releases. One announcing the successful merger, one announcing a delay for additional due diligence, and one, the one no one wanted to use, announcing that the deal had fallen through. And in a small conference room on the 41st floor, Emily Rowan sat alone, waiting. She'd been there for 7 hours now. Different HR representatives had come and gone, asking her to recount what happened that morning, taking notes, asking if she'd spoken to anyone about the incident, reminding her that she was not to discuss this matter with colleagues or post about it on social media. No one had explicitly said she was being fired, but she wasn't stupid. She knew. What she didn't know was why she'd been asked to stay late, why she was being told to come back tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock for a company-wide meeting regarding the HaleTech situation. She'd tried to apologize again, sending a longer email to Dr. Hale, explaining that she'd been stressed, that she'd made assumptions based on security protocols, that she hadn't meant any disrespect. The email had gone unanswered, just like the first one. Around 1:30 a.m., Emily's phone buzzed with a text from her roommate. "Where are you?" "It's late." Emily typed back. "Still at work. Might get fired tomorrow." "Long story." Her roommate responded immediately. "What? What happened?" Emily stared at her phone, trying to figure out how to explain it. Finally, she typed, "I refused to shake someone's hand. Turned out he was a billionaire CEO. Now everything's falling apart. Why did you refuse to shake his hand?" Emily looked at that question for a long time. Because he was black, and I assumed he didn't belong there. She couldn't type it. Couldn't admit it, even to herself. Instead, she wrote, "It's complicated. I'll tell you when I get home." But as she sat in that conference room, alone with her thoughts, Emily was forced to confront something uncomfortable. She had made an assumption. A racist assumption. She'd looked at Dr. Peter Hale, accomplished, credentialed, professionally dressed, and seen only his skin color. She'd seen a black man and decided he must be there to deliver something, not to lead something. And now, that single moment of prejudice was costing her company billions of dollars. Was costing her her job. Was proving that racism wasn't just morally wrong. It was expensive. Across town, Peter wasn't sleeping either. He'd spent the past several hours on calls with his own board, his executive team, and his closest advisors. Patricia Chase, his COO, had been blunt. "Boss, you know I'll support whatever you decide. But speaking personally, I don't think Silvercrest deserves us. They've had 90 years to build a culture of respect, and they chose not to. Why should we bail them out now?" His chief financial officer had provided the counterargument. "From a pure numbers perspective, this merger makes sense. The valuation is fair, the growth projections are solid, and we'd have access to markets that would take us years to penetrate independently. If we walk away, we're leaving significant value on the table. His general counsel had added, "Whatever you decide, make sure it's for the right reasons. If you kill this deal to make a point about discrimination, that's your prerogative as CEO. But be prepared for the backlash. Some people will say you're being too sensitive, that you should separate business from personal feelings. Others will say you're costing your shareholders money over one employee's mistake." Peter had listened to all of it. And then he'd made the decision he always made when the path forward wasn't clear. He'd called his mother. Dorothy Hale was 78 years old, a retired professor of African American history, and the person Peter trusted more than anyone in the world. "Baby, why are you calling me at midnight?" she'd answered, her voice warm despite the late hour. "I need your wisdom, Mom. That's what I'm here for. What's going on?" Peter had explained the entire situation. The refused handshake, the assumptions, the $3 billion decision hanging in the balance. His mother had listened without interrupting. Then she'd asked a single question. "Do you remember what your father used to say about integrity?" Peter smiled. "That's what you do when no one's watching." "Exactly. But it's also what you do when everyone's watching, baby. When there's money on the line. When there's pressure to compromise. That's when integrity matters most. So you think I should walk away? I think you should ask yourself what kind of leader you want to be. The kind who accepts disrespect because the check is big enough? Or the kind who shows your employees, especially your black employees, your brown employees, your employees who've been told they don't belong, that their dignity matters more than any deal?" Peter had sat with that for a long moment. What if walking away costs people their jobs? The analysts say the stock will take a hit. Shareholders will be angry. Shareholders are always angry about something, his mother said. But your employees? They're watching how you handle this. And years from now, they're not going to remember the stock price. They're going to remember whether their CEO stood up for them when it mattered. After hanging up, Peter had opened his laptop and written 2 documents. One outlined the terms under which he would proceed with the Silvercrest merger. Conditions so stringent that he doubted the company would accept them. The other was a formal letter withdrawing HaleTech from the merger negotiations, effective immediately. He saved both documents. Tomorrow morning, he'd decide which one to use. By 6 a.m., Peter was awake, showered, dressed in a fresh suit, and reviewing his notes one final time. His phone buzzed with incoming messages, texts from friends and colleagues who'd heard through the business community that something major was happening, emails from journalists asking for comment on rumors of trouble with the Silvercrest HaleTech merger, and one message from a CEO he'd never met but deeply respected. The message was from Angela Morrison, the black woman who'd recently become CEO of a major pharmaceutical company after a very public battle against discrimination at her previous employer. "Peter, I don't know all the details of what you're facing today, but I know the pressure you're under. People will tell you to be pragmatic, to separate business from personal feelings, to not make everything about race. Ignore them. Your integrity is your brand, and your brand is worth more than any deal. Whatever you decide, stand firm. The culture changers are watching and cheering for you." Peter read the message 3 times. Then he picked up the phone and called James Whitmore. "Peter, good morning. Are we still on for 8 o'clock? "We are," Peter said. "And James? I've made my decision." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "And you'll hear it at the same time as your board. See you in 2 hours." Peter ended the call and looked at himself in the mirror. Today, he would walk into that boardroom and deliver a message that would shock Silvercrest Holdings to its foundation. Today, he would show the business world what happens when prejudice meets consequence. Today, he would prove that integrity isn't just a value you claim. It's a choice you make when everything is on the line. What Dr. Peter Hale does next will be studied in business schools for decades. Subscribe now to witness one of the most powerful moments of corporate accountability ever captured. You need to see how this ends. Hit that subscribe button right now. If you were Peter, would you prioritize the financial benefit to your shareholders or the principle of standing against discrimination? Why? Drop your answer below. At precisely 8 a.m., Dr. Peter Hale walked into Silvercrest Holdings for the second time in 2 days. This time, there was no confusion at the front desk. This time, every employee in the lobby stood when he entered. This time, James Whitmore was waiting personally at the elevator, along with 2 security guards and Silvercrest's chief legal officer. "Dr. Hale, James said, his voice tight with barely controlled anxiety. Thank you for coming. The board is assembled and waiting. Peter nodded but said nothing. They rode the elevator in silence, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. When the doors opened on the executive floor, Peter was escorted directly to the main boardroom. Not the conference room from yesterday, but the larger space reserved for full board meetings and shareholder presentations. The room was packed. 15 board members sat around the enormous mahogany table. Another dozen executives lined the walls. Legal representatives occupied one corner. HR personnel sat nervously in another. And in a chair by herself, separated from everyone else like a prisoner awaiting sentencing, sat Emily Rowan. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her hands twisted a tissue in her lap. When Peter entered, she looked up, and their eyes met for a brief, painful moment. Then she looked away, shame radiating from every inch of her body. Peter took his seat at the head of the table. The power position, the place where he'd sat yesterday before walking out on this entire deal. James stood at the opposite end, looking like a man facing execution. Dr. Hale, James began, his voice formal and stilted. On behalf of Silvercrest Holdings Board of Directors, I want to thank you for agreeing to this meeting. We understand that what happened yesterday was completely unacceptable, and we're prepared to demonstrate our commitment to addressing the underlying issues that led to that incident. Peter said nothing. He simply waited. James cleared his throat and continued. To that end, we've taken several immediate actions. First, we've retained Thompson & Associates, a leading diversity consulting firm, to conduct a comprehensive audit of our company culture. Second, we've implemented mandatory bias training for all employees, starting with executive leadership. Third, we've established a dedicated diversity and inclusion committee with direct reporting authority to the board. And fourth, he paused, glancing at Emily. Fourth, we've terminated the employment of Emily Rowan, effective immediately, for conduct unbecoming of Silvercrest's values and for damaging our relationship with a key partner. Emily's breath hitched audibly, though she'd clearly known this was coming. Peter looked at her. Ms. Rowan, do you understand why you're being fired? She looked up, startled to be addressed directly. Ah, yes. Because I refused to shake your hand. Because I assumed you were a delivery person. Because her voice broke. Because I was racist. The word hung in the air. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. No one had actually said it out loud until now. Yes, Peter said quietly. You were. But I want you to understand something, Ms. Rowan. You're not being fired because you made a mistake. You're being fired because your mistake revealed a truth about this company that your leadership can no longer ignore. He turned his attention to the board. Yesterday, I told you I'd made a decision about this merger. Before I share that decision, I want to make something very clear. I didn't cancel yesterday's meeting because my feelings were hurt. I didn't walk out because I was offended. I walked out because what happened in your lobby was a symptom of a systemic problem. He pulled out his laptop and connected it to the boardroom's projection system. A slide appeared showing the data he'd compiled: discrimination settlements, retention rates, leadership diversity statistics, employee reviews. Your company has a documented pattern of making people of color feel unwelcome, of settling lawsuits instead of fixing problems, of hiring for culture fit in ways that perpetuate homogeneity. Emily Rowan didn't develop her prejudices in a vacuum. She developed them in an environment that permitted them. Board members stared at the screen, unable to argue with the numbers. So when James calls me and promises diversity training and consulting firms and new committees, I have to ask myself, are these real changes, or are these band-aids designed to save a $3 billion deal? The chairman of the board, a silver-haired man named Richard Caldwell who'd been with Silvercrest for 40 years, spoke up. Dr. Hale, I can assure you that we take these issues seriously. Do you? Peter interrupted. Then let me ask you a question, Mr. Caldwell. In your 40 years at this company, how many black executives have you hired into senior leadership? Silence. How many times have you personally reviewed discrimination complaints filed by employees of color? More silence. How many times have you looked at your all-white executive team and thought, maybe we have a problem? Richard Caldwell's jaw tightened, but he had no answer. Peter advanced to the next slide, one showing the terms under which he would consider proceeding with the merger. If Silvercrest wants to partner with HaleTech, here's what needs to happen. Not promises. Not consultants. Actual measurable change. He read from the slide. 1. Silvercrest will commit to achieving 30% diversity in executive leadership within 18 months. Not 30% of new hires. 30% of the actual leadership team. Which means some people currently in this room will need to make space for people who don't look like them. 2. All discrimination settlements from the past 10 years will be reviewed by an independent third party. Any employee who was forced to sign an NDA as part of those settlements will be released from that obligation, and anyone who was wrongfully terminated will be offered reinstatement or compensation. 3. Silvercrest will establish a $50 million fund dedicated to supporting minority-owned businesses and diverse entrepreneurs. Not as charity, as investment, with the same return expectations you'd have for any other portfolio company. 4. Every executive in this room will undergo a comprehensive 360-degree review that includes feedback from employees at all levels, with specific attention to how you've supported or hindered diversity initiatives. Those reviews will be made public within the company. And 5. Emily Rowan will be offered the opportunity to participate in a restorative justice process. Not to get her job back, but to publicly acknowledge what she did, why it was wrong, and what she's learned. Her story will be used in company training to demonstrate the real-world consequences of unchecked bias. He looked around the room. Those are my terms. Non-negotiable. If you accept them, we can move forward with the merger. If you don't, I'm walking away, and I'll make very clear to the business community why I'm doing so. James looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Peter, Dr. Hale, some of these terms would require board approval, shareholder votes, complete restructuring of our executive team. Yes, Peter said. They would require you to actually change, not just promise to change. Which is exactly the point. Richard Caldwell stood up, his face red. Dr. Hale, with all due respect, you're asking us to fundamentally alter our company structure, to potentially expose ourselves to additional legal liability by releasing NDAs, and to commit $50 million to initiatives that may or may not generate returns. That's not a merger negotiation. That's a hostile takeover of our company culture. Peter smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. Mr. Caldwell, if your company culture can't survive basic accountability and diversity requirements, then your company culture needs to be taken over. The question is whether you're willing to do that work, or whether you'd rather I walk away and explain to your shareholders why the biggest deal in your history fell apart because you couldn't shake hands with the idea of real change. The room erupted. Board members argued with each other. Executives whispered frantically. Legal counsel scribbled notes about the liability implications. James held up his hands. Please, everyone, can we have a moment to discuss this privately? Of course, Peter said. Take all the time you need. I'll be in the reception area. He stood and walked toward the door. As he passed Emily, he stopped. Ms. Rowan, he said quietly, I hope you take this opportunity to learn and grow. What you did was wrong, but it doesn't have to define the rest of your life. Use this. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Peter didn't acknowledge the apology. He simply walked out of the boardroom, leaving Silvercrest's leadership to make the most important decision in their company's history. 30 minutes later, James Whitmore emerged from the boardroom, his face pale but determined. Dr. Hale, he said, the board has voted. We accept your terms. All of them. Peter stood. You understand what this means? The commitments you're making. We do. And we also understand that if we don't follow through, you'll walk away from this merger so fast our heads will spin. You've made that very clear. Good, Peter said. Then let's proceed. He extended his hand. James took it, and they shook, a handshake that sealed a $3 billion deal and, more importantly, committed Silvercrest Holdings to fundamental cultural change. As Peter left the building, he pulled out his phone and sent a message to his entire company. HaleTech family. The Silvercrest merger is proceeding, but only after they committed to real, measurable change in their culture and leadership. Our integrity is not for sale, and it never will be. Proud to lead a company that refuses to compromise on values. Peter. Within minutes, responses flooded in from employees across all of HaleTech's offices. This is why we work here. Thank you for standing up for us. You showed the whole industry what real leadership looks like. By noon, the story had broken. Bloomberg. HaleTech Silvercrest merger proceeds after culture reforms. Wall Street Journal. How one refused handshake led to $3 billion deals near collapse. The Washington Post. Black CEO demands real diversity changes before proceeding with major merger. Social media exploded with commentary. This is what accountability looks like. Dr. Peter Hale just taught the entire corporate world a lesson. Every CEO needs to read about what happened at Silvercrest. And in a small apartment in Queens, Emily Rowan sat on her couch, scrolling through the coverage, confronting the reality that her single moment of prejudice had become a national news story about corporate racism and accountability. She'd lost her job. She'd humiliated herself publicly. But she'd also, inadvertently, sparked a conversation that was long overdue. 6 months later, Silvercrest Holdings announced the promotion of 3 new executives to their leadership team. A Black woman as Chief Diversity Officer, a Latino man as Senior Vice President of Operations, and an Asian American woman as Chief Technology Officer. The diversity training programs became industry-leading, studied by other firms trying to address their own cultural problems. The $50 million investment fund supported 47 minority-owned businesses in its first year. And Emily Rowan, after months of therapy and genuine soul-searching, participated in the restorative justice process Peter had proposed. She spoke at company training, acknowledging her racism, explaining how she'd been shaped by unconscious bias, and describing the devastation her assumptions had caused. It didn't undo what she'd done, but it was a start. And Dr. Peter Hale? He became known not just as a successful CEO, but as the man who refused to let a $3 billion deal proceed until the other company proved they valued people as much as profit. His integrity became his legacy. His refusal to compromise on values became a case study taught in business schools. And the handshake that was refused became the handshake that shook an industry. If this story showed you what real integrity looks like, what happens when a leader refuses to compromise on values, even when billions of dollars are at stake, then subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to see that standing up against discrimination is always worth it, no matter the cost. Because Dr. Peter Hale didn't just save a deal. He changed a culture, protected his employees' dignity, and proved that respect isn't negotiable at any price. Hit that subscribe button and join us in celebrating leaders who choose principle over profit every single time. What's one action you can take in your own workplace or community to address discrimination when you see it? Share your commitment in the comments below.